Hello, my name is Brian, and I'm here to talk about productivity. So this is what I call the 1 hour game dev productivity method, or I have a full-time job, a family, friends, chores, maybe I want to play some video games too. How do I make a game while doing all of that? So this idea is how to fit in making a game while you have a full-time job and a full-time life. How do you do this as maybe a hobby or even as a side project or however you want to call it? So first of all, I've worked on a bunch of video games. I did a go-kart game a long time ago. I also worked on this game called Natural Selection 2, a hybrid first-person shooter, real-time strategy action game. More recently, I'm working on this game called Monster Train, which is a roguelite digital card game with a deck builder, all this kind of stuff. So this is what I'm working on now. But I've also worked on a bunch of other smaller projects, many game jams, as well as a trivia game for iOS that I released last year using some of these methods. And a few years ago, I worked on a tabletop game called One Last Job. So a lot of experience making games, many of these professional, many of them not professional. So I've thought a lot about more recently, how do I make games more effectively? Specifically the games that I want to make as a side project, not my full-time job. But how do I make that happen? How do I fit it in? So these are a couple books I've read throughout the years. The War of Art talks about how you treat, in this case, this author is an author, so he writes novels, and how do you be productive in that art? And it really applies to any art. And then Daily Rituals. So how a bunch of different artists, many of them authors or painters, how they would structure their day and be productive. So these are books I've read that really makes me think about my own productivity. So using this method, what sort of success have I had? Is there any reason to pay attention to this? So I have a trivia mobile game I released on the App Store in December of 2019, and I did an update to that in early this year. And I have a new game I'm working on that's in progress. So sort of successful, not successful in any monetary sense, certainly. But the way I measure success for myself is just hours. I know the game I want to make. I know I can make it, so it's just a matter of putting the hours in. And so far this year, I've spent about 135 hours. This is just on my game projects. Later on, I'll show you some more of the methodology, and it applies to more than just games. But for my game projects, I spent 135 hours, and I want to reiterate, this is not my full-time work. That's extra hours on top of this. This is just the projects I'm working on my own. So that equals 16 full-time work days, which is almost a little over 2 full-time work weeks of time I've put into this year so far. But for each success, I've had many, many failures. Don't bother reading all of these. These are just the directory names of my big projects folder. Many of these did not come to fruition, and this is kind of throughout the years what has led me to this point where I'm at now, where I think I have a decent method. So what are some of the problems I've encountered in the past? Energy and motivation are big ones for me. Focus, I lose interest over time, leads to the time commitment that a project requires, working on the same thing for months and months at a time. How do you make that happen? And then there's just the general overwhelming weight of life, just the stress and anxiety of living and doing chores and waking up and all this kind of stuff. These are all these problems that I think many people encounter. I've encountered them. I still encounter them. So, and these manifest in some concrete ways. Like having many projects active at once. You're having a lot of context switching between these projects, which leads you to lose interest in these projects as the reality of the work involved in them comes to light. Having giant to-do lists mixed with chores you have to do, going to the dentist, all this kind of stuff with all these maybe other to-do lists of what you're working on in your various projects, and just having the weight of these lists in front of you all the time. Once you get home from work, from your full-time job, you don't have energy to work on your projects anymore. You're tired. You want to relax, decompress. And similarly, on the weekend, you want to relax and have fun with your friends and family. So I would supplement my maybe not perfect sleep habits and lack of exercise with caffeine, which I think many people do. Many people have caffeine for all sorts of reasons, but that was my reason. It's just I was tired, I didn't have energy, so I would have caffeine. And I would always be chasing the next game idea. So I'd have, maybe 5 projects going at once, and some of these I'd lose interest in, and there's always a new project on the horizon that is always more exciting and shiny. So, and this is another very concrete one, but I would waste hours just looking at my phone in bed trying to wake up. So all of this has eventually culminated into what I call the 1 hour game dev productivity method. If someone has a better idea for the name of this, please let me know. Not that I'm trying to brand this or anything, but so I have 4 points I wanted to touch on tonight, which is to keep it secret, keep making progress, keep moving, keep it to 1 hour, and keep track. So I first wanted to share this quote. This comes from one of the books I was reading. Be regular and orderly in your life so that you may be violent and original in your work. So this is something I've taken quite seriously lately, of trying to structure my day to make it so that it's really just about hours. I believe that's true. So make it so I have the hours I need to spend on my projects. So first of all, keep it secret, keep making progress. Don't tell anyone what you are working on. So this is a difficult one. This is something that I read this, there was an article I read about, research had shown that if you just announce your goals to other people, you're less likely to achieve those goals. And this is something I read and it was intuitively true to me. I immediately was like, yes, that makes sense. And I need to stop telling people what I'm working on. Telling people what you want to achieve creates a premature sense of completeness. So I think it triggers something in your brain. Maybe it's dopamine, I don't know what. I'm not a brain scientist. But it gives you the feeling of success and completeness. You're excited about it, you want to share it, and it feels good to tell people what you're planning to do and what you're going to work on. But that actually makes you less likely to achieve those goals. So I really recommend, I don't talk to people what I'm working on. It's not because I want to try and be a secretive person or anything. It's because I believe this is true on a kind of brain chemistry level. So as I was working on that trivia game, I didn't tell anyone. I told my partner who I live with only when I was about a month away from finishing the game. I just had her start playtesting it. So there becomes a point where you have to tell people. You want to get feedback on what you're working on. But I think early on especially, you have to kind of judge. Am I telling people because I have this innate desire to tell people, or am I telling people because I need help? So that's a balance that you have to figure out. So leading into the next point, this is a chart I think I saw on Twitter. What I thought would make me productive is a bunch of hard work. What actually makes me productive is a mixture of exercise, healthy livings, eating, sleep, time off, and hard work. So I think everyone looks at this and yes, this makes sense. This is true, but it's kind of different seeing this and actually internalizing it. So a few years ago, this is probably 7 years ago at this point, I decided I need to exercise. I realized, the brain is part of the body. And I had tried exercising before in the past, and it never really took because I think I was just doing it out of this vague sense of, it'll be a good thing to do, or people should exercise. But what I realized is in order for me to feel better and have more energy to work on my projects, I need to actually exercise my body. And here's some proof that this is true. So as we can see from this diagram, the brain is solidly within what I call the body system. So we could see the body system and the brain is solidly within that system. So your brain is part of your body. If you exercise your body, it's going to help your brain. I'm sure there's many ways of showing this is true and a lot of proof, but basically it just was empirically true for me. I started off trying to run actually, and I failed horribly at running. It was awful. I hated it. That sent me back a few months, if not a year. Then I decided I'm just going to walk. So I was lucky enough I had a commute where it involved a good amount of walking. And then on the weekends, I would challenge myself with walking. I would sometimes walk 4 miles to my friend's house, maybe longer. And this was really great. I noticed my endurance was getting better. I would try and walk faster. This is something that was very accessible for me to do, even though I wasn't incredibly fit at the time. That led to me getting on my bike. So I'd have a morning bike ride, maybe every day, every other day. I would do maybe a 2 or 3 mile loop around my neighborhood before taking my morning shower and going to work. So I was able to fit this in about a half an hour. And eventually that led to me being able to run. And now I run about every other day, and I really like running because it's a very time-efficient way to exercise. But it's something that at least I had to really build up to running. I tried just running immediately, and it didn't work for me. And this has resulted in huge energy spikes. So I'm exaggerating a bit here, but I definitely just had way more energy after I started exercising. It's simple as that. Just even the walking, the biking, whatever it is, it has helped me a lot in terms of my energy level. So another part of this is getting up in the morning. And I think we all have this experience or have had this experience in the past of, you wake up, the alarm goes off, you pick up your phone to turn off the alarm, and Twitter's right there, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And you just start browsing for a little bit. You kind of tell yourself, I'm waking up. This is okay. And it's comfortable to do. I still like doing this, but I at some point I forced myself to put the phone on a table away from the bed. So I have it on a dresser on the other side of the room. It's plugged in to charge overnight. The alarm goes off, and I immediately get out of bed and turn off that alarm. So this has helped me tremendously. So now I can kind of get out of bed immediately, not waste time on my phone, and that results in me having, sometimes I would waste up to an hour in bed just looking at my phone, at least a half an hour every day. So it's minutes that you're getting back with this, And there's other places you could put your phone. For example, you could keep it outdoors in the elements, or just put it in the trash where it belongs, if we're all honest with ourselves. Another point I'd like to... This image was hilarious. I had to include it. I don't know what's going on here. But naps are really a great thing. I started... luckily, I work from home, and I'm able to, when I don't have a lot of energy, I don't drink caffeine anymore, so I'll take a nap. So a nap is my form of caffeine now. I'll just nap for about a half an hour. Sometimes I won't even fully fall asleep. But it's a really strong way to boost up your energy levels. Not everyone can do this, especially if you work in an office, but maybe on the weekends you're wanting to work on your project and you're a little bit tired. Do you just sit down and try and grind through it, and maybe you're not productive, maybe you're looking at social media, or do you just maybe invest a half an hour and do a nap, and then you have that energy to go and tackle whatever your goal is? So this is the crux of the whole thing. Keep it to 1 hour. So it's 1 hour a day, every day. So I'll break down the math here. The math is pretty simple. 1 hour a day is 7 hours per week. I think that's accurate so far. About 30 hours per month. Leads to 365 hours per year. And that equals, if you look at a 40-hour work week, that's a little over 9 full-time work weeks in the year that you get to work on your project. So this is kind of a Grand Canyon strategy where an hour a day isn't much. Many people can afford that, to block out that time in their schedule. If you can't, you can try and find ways to block it out, or even just do a half an hour, whatever it is. You chip away at something for a long period of time, and you could eventually build something big. So that, at the end of a year, that equals over 2 months of full-time work. So that's as if you had a full-time job for 2 months of that year, that you're just working on your own project. When I realized this, it became obvious that this is what I needed to do. And especially, I was, starting this year, we had our first child in December, and I kind of realized I need to do, if I want to keep working on my personal projects, which are very important to me, I need to make this happen somehow, and I need to be rigid about it. I need to have a strategy, because it's going to be tough. This is another, this is maybe not the right point in the presentation, I'm realizing, but this is another point that I wanted to point out. It kind of leads into this, actually. So if you're working on your project for 1 hour at a time, you're going to sometimes be halfway through something when you're working on it. And maybe you work an extra half an hour, an extra hour. Maybe you do 2 hours a day, that day, whatever. That's fine too. But many times I find myself with only an hour, even less than an hour. Sometimes I only have half an hour. So I'm halfway through something. So what I do is I leave myself notes. I'm a programmer, so in this case, in my code. Many times this is how I do it. I also have a separate note application I use to keep track. But what's great about this is this will produce a compiler error. So the project won't work. You'll get an error message that this code doesn't look right. This isn't code. This is just me writing in plain text. And so the error will be immediately obvious when I start working on my project the next day. I won't be able to ignore it. And I could go into code, and I have a nice message for myself here. I could very quickly, within seconds, I could be back where I was. So my point here is to make it easier for yourself to work in these 1 hour chunks by leaving detailed messages to yourself. Maybe you have a great memory. I don't. I'm like the guy from Memento, so I got to leave myself notes constantly. So this is about focus. You have all these project ideas coming out of your head constantly. And, this still happens to me, and I write down these project ideas into, I use Google Keep, kind of a notepad application. I'd encourage you to keep writing them down, because who knows when you're going to be excited to work on a project. But I don't immediately start working on a new project. I'm planning to work on the project I've been working on since about February for the rest of the year. That's all I'm doing for the rest of the year. So what I'd recommend you do is you focus on one project. This is, I think, going to be hard for a lot of people to, you're multiple things going on, you're excited about all of them. But for myself, I've found that it's very beneficial for me to focus on one thing at a time. Slow motion wrestling sounds pretty cool to me. It's not what I'm working on now, but maybe I'll start investigating it next year. So I wanted to talk about this, what I call 1 hour case study. So the question was, should I participate in the Indiecade Climate Game Jam from April 18th to the 21st? This was an online game jam happening earlier this month. I'm very passionate about climate change, and this was a perfect intersection of my interests. So I immediately was wanting to go into this and just kind of put my other project on hold for a few days. So I started thinking about it kind of mathematically. So my evaluation was, okay, that's 4 days, meaning that's 4 hours I can guarantee I could spend on it. Maybe I can do a few more hours, but not many more. I can maybe do 6 hours. So let's say 4 hours. So I wrote down a few game ideas I had. I was very excited about these ideas. I had maybe 3 of them. And then I just thought to myself, I tried to be objective. Can I do any of these in that 4 hour time span? And after I thought about it, the answer was no, absolutely not. The simplest of my ideas would take maybe 12 hours, 18 hours, more on that scale than 4 hours. So the answer was I'm not doing the game jam. I really wanted to, but I can't fit it in. It doesn't fit into, the time I have. So finally, I want to touch on this point, and this is also very important. Keep track. So you want to see the time add up. So this is my Google spreadsheet where I track all of my time. So this has my game projects as well as some of my other non-game projects. You can see Ranker is the trivia game I did, and then my new game is I have trading as the name of the category there. But I also have a CCL is just some volunteer work I do. It's not even game related. So I mix all this together. I track many different things. In the past, I've tracked even more broadly, but I mostly just my game projects this year. So I have the date, the category or project, time in, time out. So when I start working on it, I put whatever time it is when I start. When I'm done, I write the other time, time out, and then that calculates adds up all the time, the hours I've spent on this. I have another tab in this sheet that kind of gives me a breakdown of everything. So I could see on the left side, how much time have I spent on these different projects. So I could see the Global Game Jam I spent 26 hours on this year, hosted by PIGSquad, little shout out. And the Ranker trivia game, I did another 26. My new trading game, I've over 82 at this point. This is a little bit old, this screenshot. But so it's very satisfying for me to see my time adding up. Like I've already done 82 hours on my newest project. That's 2 full-time work weeks I've spent on this project this year alone. I can also break it down per week. So I have per project here. So the Ranker project I kind of finished off in February, and then I started the trading project within that time too. So I could see per week where I am. And this is where it becomes useful. As I'm going through the week, I can verify, am I getting toward my 7 hour? So when I took the screenshot at the bottom right, you can see the 17th week, I only had 0.73 hours. So that day I didn't do my full, time yet, my full hour. But I try to hit 7 hours for the week. That's always my goal. If I go a little bit under, it's okay. If I go over, that's great. But I try and hit 7. So this ends up feeling like kind of some kind of gamification BS, and I think it is in a way, but it's also really effective. So it's very compelling you're almost collecting these hours, and you're seeing it build up, and that you're working on something you're excited about, and you're seeing that you're objectively putting the time into the project. It becomes very, very compelling very quickly. Something I wanted to point out now, though, is don't feel guilty. I put guilty into Google image search, and this image came up, and I just felt I had to use it. So don't feel guilty. If you don't get your time in a day, it's not the worst thing. Don't struggle to start working at 11 p.m. to get your hour in before midnight. That's not the idea behind this. I've had appointments where I miss whole days. Sometimes I make that time up, sometimes I don't. You're looking for that whole year. You want to hit 365 hours for the year. You want to hit 7 hours a week. If you're a little bit below on some weeks, a little bit above on other weeks, holistically you're trying to look at that goal. That's the intent. So look at it from the whole year. And that's all I had to share for today. So thank you for your time. If you'd like to contact me on Twitter, Brian G. Cronin, or programmingisgood@gmail.com email. If you'd like the copy of that template, that spreadsheet, I'd be happy to share. Or if you want to reach out for any other reason, please send me a message. Thanks.